Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Dix. I'm BC's Minister of Health. I'm the MLA for Vancouver Kingsway. 15 years ago, on April the 3rd, 2006, the BC legislature passed the following motion, unanimously, people from all parties voting in favor. Be it resolved that this House recognize the genocide of the Armenians as a crime against humanity. Be it further resolved that this House urged the BC government to designate April 24th of every year hereafter throughout BC as a day of remembrance for the 1.5 million Armenians who fell victim to the first genocide of the 20th century. I'd like to start by acknowledging the territories of the Musqueam, of the Squamish, of the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations as we come together today. Further to that, and as British Columbians from all over BC, to recognize and to commemorate the events of the Armenian genocide and what they mean for us and for the Armenian Canadian community, for what they mean for us as humanity, and for what they mean to us today. Joining me today are several of my colleagues in the BC legislature, including Rachna Singh, the Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism Initiatives, my colleague Aman Singh, who's a great friend of the Armenian community and the MLA for Richmond, Queensborough, my colleague Shirley Bond, the leader of the opposition, and we're very honored to have Shirley there. She was there that day when we passed that motion, and she was with me two years ago. The last time we were able to come together, I believe it was Armenian National Day 2 years ago in 2019, the last time the Armenian community came to the legislature, and we spoke both of these events and the contributions of the Armenian Canadian community to our province. Also speaking today will be Natalie Bozikian, an active member of the Armenian community and a representative of the United Armenian Committee of British Columbia, and Garan Atermigrian, a first-generation Canadian citizen, Atermigrian, excuse me, Garan, a first-generation Canadian citizen of Armenian descent. I also want to acknowledge a number of Armenian community groups who are joining us on YouTube today, including the United Armenian Community Committee, the Armenian Cultural Association of BC, St. Vartan Armenian Church, the Armenian Democratic Liberal Parties, St. Gregory Armenian Church, and of course the Armenian National Committee, all great friends of ours. We're, of course, commemorating the events of the Armenian genocide, and we do so on April 24th because on April 24th, 1915, 23 Armenian community leaders and intellectuals were rounded up by the then Ottoman government. And of course, they were subsequently jailed, many tortured, and murdered. And this started the events of the Armenian genocide that led to the killing of an estimated 1.5 million Armenians in the then Ottoman Empire, events that transpired from 1915 to 1923. And of course, it's often when we designate a date, we think, well, that date's the beginning of something. But of course, the context, and Rachna will be talking about this, the context was one of racism, of decades of racism that had preceded those events, that set the stage for those events, that set the stage for people viewing other people of worthy of state-sponsored massacre as occurred at that time. And so, and then, of course, we want to view it in a broader context as well. And that broader context is what's happened to the Armenian community since and to this day, and the consequences that come from not recognizing crimes against humanity when they exist, of not prosecuting crimes against humanity when they exist, and its long-term consequences for all of us. And that's why it's important to recognize these events as a crime against humanity, why it was important for the BC legislature to do so, why it will be important tomorrow, as we hear reported in the news, that the President of the United States finally recognized those events as genocide after many years of characterizing it in other ways, perhaps for political or other reasons. It's important, but it is also fundamentally painful for the Armenian community, Canadian community, and the Armenian diaspora around the world to have to fight this fight of recognition for events that occurred that are scrupulously and extensively documented and were acknowledged at the time to have occurred. And it's that challenge, that genocide and then denial of genocide that took place by the Ottoman government, of course, but subsequent and successor governments as well to the present day, that adds a special level, if it's even possible, a special level of pain. And that's why it's important that we come together today, that we remember the families that were affected and the fact that every Armenian family in Canada, every Armenian family around the world was touched by the genocide. A dear friend of mine, Jack Deragopian, who's part of the Armenian National Committee, his dad, Armenek, who's passed away, who was there that day in 2006, has passed away since, described it such, and his words describe it, his circumstance as well. My father's family was massacred, he wrote me in 2004, about 16 people. My father survived because he was working in Egypt at the time of World War I and was unable to return to his home region. My mother managed to escape, but much of her family was massacred as well. Her father was orphaned. Her mother managed to escape to Egypt with her grandmother. Of the 300,000 people, Armenians in my father's region, only an estimated 10,000 people survived. So we look at these events and recognize, of course, the extraordinary contribution of the Armenian Canadian community for a long time in the years very soon after World War I. We also, I think, have to acknowledge the long-standing hurt and pain caused by these events. The fact that after World War I, the aspirations, the national aspirations of the Armenian people were denied and essentially betrayed in those years. That the current status, the current territorial status of Armenia as a country was decided by none other than one of history's great monsters, Joseph Stalin. That the fact that Nagorno-Karabakh was assigned to the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic has had implications to this day, but that the legitimacy of that has to be understood as a decision made by, again, one of history's great monsters. So what it tells us is the importance of recognizing, acknowledging genocide, recognizing and acknowledging crimes against humanity, and understanding that to this day they have implications for all of us. We've seen this, of course. We're living in a time of pandemic. I'm Minister of Health. The pandemic is affecting people all over the world. It's from Prince George, where Shirley Bond lives, to Vancouver, where I live, to Yerevan, the capital of the current Armenian Republic. And it's affected all of us. And indeed, these events do affect us in these times. And one thinks back to the events around 1918 to 1923, when it was a time of pandemic as well, when an influenza epidemic affected the entire world, a quarter of the people on the planet. And it's easy, of course, to be distracted, but to understand that the present circumstances of Armenian people around the world is affected by this denial of history that has been perpetrated for a long time and has to be spoken up about. It affects us in Aleppo, when Armenian communities are forced to flee and massacred. It affects us, of course, in the events that have occurred this year involving Arzak and the war that occurred within this year in Armenia and between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The fact is, we have to be for human rights everywhere. We have to be for justice everywhere. And we have to be for the self-determination of peoples everywhere. These are some of the lessons for all of us of the Armenian genocide. But of course, they're not the only lessons. The extraordinary contribution of Armenians to our society, to our people, remain and stand as a symbol of the endurance. And the fact that Armenians have led the fight for human rights around the world, have led the fight for the recognition of other genocides, reflects, I think, their extraordinary nature as a people. So I am filled with gratitude and remembrance for the 1.5 million people who died, and for the Armenian communities who contribute so much every day to the people of BC. And with that, I would like to introduce my colleague, the Parliamentary Secretary of our Anti-Racism Initiatives, the MLA for Surrey Green Timbers, my colleague, Rachna Singh.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for your gracious welcome. I'm grateful to be speaking to you from the shared traditional territories of the Semiahmoo, Ketsi, Kwikwetlam, Kwantlen, and Swasan First Nations. We are grateful for the history, traditions, perspectives, and ways of life that are the foundation of this great province and contribute to our strength and prosperity. As Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism Initiatives, I'm honored to be part of government that is committed to building a safer, more inclusive, and welcoming province, one where everyone can participate freely and fully in the economic, social, cultural, and political life of British Columbia. Today, I'm honored to bring greetings on behalf of Premier John Horgan. With the rise of bigotry and intolerance around the world, it is more important than ever to learn from our history. On April 24, 1915, hundreds of Armenian poets, musicians, publicists, editors, lawyers, and doctors were arrested, exiled, and murdered by Ottoman Turkey. The killing expanded into massacres of the male Armenian population and the deportation of the Armenian women, children, and the elderly into the Syrian desert. Today, we take the time to remember this important history and honor the memories of the 1.5 million Armenians who were killed because of who they were. Opportunities to come together and reflect also serve to remind us of the reasons to hope and celebrate. As Canada's most culturally diverse province, British Columbia is enriched by the values and traditions of many different faiths and backgrounds. The strength and resilience of Armenian Canadians, both here in BC and across the country, show the human spirit will always win out. We must recognize the truth of the past in order to recognize and speak out against discrimination and all forms of hate and prejudice in the present, so that together we can commit to building a more peaceful society for tomorrow. Today, we reassert our government's commitment to upholding the human rights of every person, regardless of their religion, ethnic background, or political beliefs. Now, I would like to introduce Natalie Bezekian. Natalie is an active member of the Armenian community and a representative of the United Armenian Committee of British Columbia. She's passionate about human rights, philanthropic causes, business, and the arts. Please welcome Natalie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before we get started, it is incredibly important to acknowledge the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples, Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh that we live on. Thank you, Parliamentary Secretary Singh, for the introduction. Thank you, Minister Dix, for organizing this event. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It is an honor to be here with you all. And now, please join me in a moment of silence for the 1.5 million Armenians' lives lost, for the countless families and friends who grieve their loss till this day, and for all the meritors of the heartless genocide. Let's take a moment of silence. Thank you. Words can never be enough to express the tremendous grief our nation had suffered in 1915, and still does today, because of the deplorable crime of the Ottoman Empire against the Armenian population in the form of a systematically perpetrated genocide that resulted in 1.5 million Armenians being deported, massacred, and marched to their deaths within the Syrian deserts. The constant denial of the genocide by the Turkish government till now add insult to injury. And while there are many proofs that these tragedies did happen, we, the displaced generations of survivors who carry the trauma, heartache, and loss, are living proof of it. And it is just and righteous governments like Canada's that stand with us in recognizing the truth through acts like Motion 587, which recognizes the tragedies of the Holocaust, the Rwandan Tutsi genocide, as well as the Armenian genocide. And for that, I would like to say thank you to the Canadian government and its support. During 2020, and in the midst of a global pandemic, our people were forced to relive this intergenerational trauma and tyranny, where Turkish-backed Azerbaijani military attacks were conducted on the Republic of Artsakh, an area where native Armenian people resided for millennials. This war was supported by Turkish government and fueled by prejudice and racism against the Armenian people with the same entitlement that was perpetrating the first genocide. The lasting impact of this war by Azerbaijan and Turkey has yet again induced the traumatic deportation of Armenians from their homes and robbing of their rights to a peaceful life. Today, we solemnly reflect the first mass atrocity of the 20th century, as well as the continuation of it in 2020. Today, we call on all Armenians and allies to learn from this tragedy so it may never be repeated, for the sake of living in a world where no such thing can occur. Today, we think about what we can do to make sure these violations on all humankind alike never happen again. Atrocities like this should not occur anywhere, anytime, and against any people based on their religion, race, tribal identity, political affiliation, gender, or sexual orientation. Justice to the Armenian cause is justice for all humanity. And our dream to live in a world where no person faces injustices like these still remains. With a hopeful look forward, we continue to emphasize the importance of historical remembrance as a tool of prevention, as we call for a full acknowledgement of the truth. We have seen how recognition of the painful elements of history makes nations grow stronger, builds foundation for a more just and tolerant future. Today, we stand in unity, recalling the horror of the genocide and reaffirm our ongoing commitment to a democratic, peaceful, and prosperous world. Thank you, and I would like to introduce MLA Singh, who will be speaking next.
Thank you, Natalie. That was really, thank you for your words. And thank you, everybody else. I come to you from the traditional territories of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katsi, Samiamu, Sawasan, Kayakat, and Kwikwetlam nations. It's really imperative to remember our shared collective history so we can work towards avoiding the wrongs of the past. Natalie just spoke about that. So today, we're here gathered to remember Red Sunday, that day on April 24th, 1915. It also gives me great pleasure today, and it's my honor to present and read out this proclamation from the government of British Columbia. From the province of British Columbia, a proclamation, Elizabeth II, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom, Canada, and her other realms and territories, Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, to all to whom these presents shall come, greeting. Whereas on April 24th, each year since the 1920s, Armenians have commemorated the victims of the tragic 1915 Armenian genocide, and whereas on April 24th, 1915, hundreds of Armenian poets, musicians, publicists, editors, lawyers, and doctors in Constantinople were arrested, exiled, and murdered by Ottoman Turkey. And whereas the government of British Columbia honors the memories of those who lost their lives as a result of this massacre and their descendants, including the Armenian community in British Columbia. And whereas the government of British Columbia recognizes the strength and the resilience of the Armenian people, and whereas Armenian Memorial Day is an opportunity for British Columbians to reflect on the historic injustices while raising awareness about the many forms of racism, injustices, discrimination, and hate disproportionately suffered by minority communities, now know ye that we do by these presents proclaim and declare that April 24, 2021 shall be known as Armenian Memorial Day in the province of British Columbia. In testimony whereof, we have caused these our letters to be made patent and the Great Seal of our province of British Columbia to be hereunto affixed, and it's signed by the Attorney General and Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia. I also have the pleasure of introducing Garan Atarmagarian. Garan's a first-generation Canadian of Armenian descent, owns a business. He's been self-employed for the last 13 years, but his hobby is also writing, producing, and recording music, and he owns a home-based recording studio, has so for the last 20 years, and has recorded various artists. He'll tell us about those. Your turn, Garan.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Garan Atarmagarian, and I'm very grateful and honored to be speaking today about the Armenian genocide. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge and thank Minister Adrian Dix for arranging this commemorative event, for his foundational role on the passing of the Armenian genocide motion in the BC legislature in April 2006. This year marks the 15th anniversary, and for standing on the side of truth and justice with the Armenian community as we continue our rightful demands for recognition and reparations for the gravest of crimes against humanity. I would also like to thank the government and official opposition for being present. Also to all the organizers who helped create this year's virtual commemoration. Being a first-generation Canadian citizen, I've had great opportunities to become a successful, self-employed young man, be able to reside in a beautiful neighborhood, province, and country, and be able to raise my wonderful family in a conflict-free environment. I cannot say the same for my ancestors, which have faced unpunishable crimes of genocide in 1915. Even after 106 years of denial from the Turkish government, we as Armenians are still greatly affected by the horrible atrocities that took place against our people sought out by the Ottoman Empire. Just last year's war in Armenia and Artsakh were created by Azerbaijan and Turkey, and now more than ever, Armenia needs our full attention. The first thing that comes to mind when I hear the words Armenian genocide is the 1.5 million innocent lives that were destroyed through separation of loved ones, death marches, starvation, and ultimately complete annihilation. There are no words to describe the inhumane actions carried out by the Ottoman Empire. Looking at pictures of Armenian men decapitated, children's bodies laying lifeless in piles, women hanging from their necks from trees, these are difficult pictures to paint, however, they are the truth. We must not forget, and we must teach the youth about the tragedies that our ancestors endured. This is what I faced personally with my family, explaining to my wife and children why all of our family members are scattered all over the world. What the Armenian genocide actually means, why April 24th is an important day, and why we come together as a community to commemorate this day, and ultimately explain how one group of people could do so much evil to another group of people. We are left to explain how all of our land was taken, all of our literature was burned, the music was stolen, the churches and castles were destroyed, our history was completely wiped out. But now we're left to rebuild the pieces, to rebuild the Armenian legacy for our ancestors' sake. I would like to conclude with a poem written by William Soroyan. I would like to see any power of the world destroy this race, this small tribe of unimportant people whose wars have all been fought and lost, whose structures have crumbled, literature is unread, music is unheard, and prayers are no more answered. Go ahead, destroy Armenia. See if you can do it. Send them into the desert with no bread or water. Burn their homes and churches. Then see if they will not laugh, sing, and pray again. For when two of them meet anywhere in the world, see if they will not create a new Armenia. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Shirley Bond, the leader of the opposition in British Columbia.
Thank you so much, Garan, and your words are so powerful, it's almost hard to speak at this moment. So thank you for having us face those very difficult images. I appreciate your words. Thank you so much for having me here today as we commemorate the solemn anniversary of the Armenian genocide. I want to say how grateful I am to Minister Dix for the kind invitation to participate today, and I want to recognize the opposition critic for anti-racism, MLA Teresa Watt, who is joining me by participating via YouTube today. As Minister Dix pointed out, I was a member of the legislature when MLAs stood side by side and in unity to recognize the Armenian genocide as a crime against humanity, a crime against all of us. Some days in the House are more memorable and emotional than others, and that motion is something I will never forget. And I know that Minister Dix shares that memory with me. The Armenian genocide is one of the darkest chapters in human history, with more than 1 million Armenians systematically murdered by the Ottoman Empire. It's difficult to say those words and even more unimaginable to think about that. And we've just heard about some of the images that are hard to erase from our minds. It is so vital that we continue to teach, to educate, and share the painful story of this unimaginable tragedy so that we can learn from our history and ensure that these horrific acts no longer happen. But it is only through recognizing the darkness that humanity as a whole can move toward the light. Just as the Armenian people did following the atrocities and genocide during the First World War, declaring an independent Armenian Republic in May of 1918. And we soon approach the 103rd anniversary of that momentous event next month, with Republic Day just weeks away. We should also take the time to acknowledge not just those who were senselessly killed in the genocide, but also those who lost their lives in the fight to secure Armenian independence and to keep it free. The idea of self-determination and a sovereign nation for the Armenian people persisted through the horrors of genocide and the later Soviet occupation. It would not be until 1991 that Armenia would reemerge on the world stage as an independent republic. But 1918 remains the date that the people of Armenia hold in their hearts now, as they did during the fight for freedom over the many decades since. So today, we also reflect on the suffering and sacrifices that led to the formation both of the First and Second Armenian republics. And to those Armenians who have chosen to make their homes here in British Columbia, I thank you for your contributions to our province, for sharing your rich and vibrant culture with all of us. And I truly hope that by the time September comes, we will be able to gather together safely in person and celebrate the formation of the Second Republic on your Independence Day. Thank you for allowing me to be with you today, as together we honor the strength of the Armenian people and commit to working together to make British Columbia a place where everyone is respected and valued and can live without the fear of discrimination or persecution. Thank you again, Minister Dix, for your passion. I can hear it in your voice, and for hosting this most important event.
Well, thank you very much, Shirley. To have the Leader of the Opposition here and joining us today is really a significant thing, and I think it reflects the unanimity of you in the legislature and support for the Armenian Canadian community and for the importance of recognizing again and speaking of the Armenian genocide. And thank you to Rashna, to Natalie, to Aman, to Garen, to all of you for your eloquent and thoughtful words. It's now my privilege to share with you a musical piece by the Dagger Choir. The founder and leader is the Very Reverend Karakin Shikardemian, the pastor of St. Gregory's Church in Richmond, BC, and that brings a smile to my friend Aman's face. And the choir members are all former members, former students at the Armenian Seminary in Antilias, Lebanon, just outside Beirut. They are currently deacons and choir members at parish churches throughout the Middle East and Canada. We hope you enjoy this.
Bam 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 ti ongatai ever tushi gernaktamur biboba ti ongatai ever tushi Gărnatamur bit boba, Sirelchides, Gărvicides, Tu anăsca erdasa, Sirelchides, Gărvicides, Tu anăsca erdasa. Fedayine, can fedayine, ser mayrere, ses kurban. Ah fedayine, can fedayine, ser mayrere, ses kurban. Meşo sultan surgarabe, sezili Sezilini ognagan, Sercătoris, iet vercaiser, Tonec partă așarii. Sercătoris, iet vercaiser, Tonec partă așarii. Sergiaș fața iaschi, Cănantăbre, carim zapar, Sergiaș fața iaschi.
Thank you very much to the Dagger Choir. Each member separately sung their parts, and as you can see, everything was combined and mixed together. And I don't know how that happens, but I know that it happens. We just saw it, and it was fantastic. And in particular, thanks to Father Karakeen for making it happen for us today. This concludes our virtual event, and I want to thank everyone for taking part, all of you who are taking part virtually through YouTube today in this event, and all the people who helped us organize the event here today. And I want to say to everybody, of course, that it's so important right now that all of us be kind to one another and be safe. Somebody I know says that quite frequently, but I think on this day, dealing with this subject and during this